Baseball this Sunday is the defending World Series champion Chicago Cubs hosting the New York Yankees at Wrigley Field on ESPN. Sunday Night Baseball. Defending World Series champion Cubs and Chris Bryant host the New York Yankees and Aaron Judge at Wrigley Field. I know for me, I'm expecting a lot of home runs to be hit on Sunday Night Baseball presented by Taco Bell. The voice of Sunday Night Baseball is Dan Schulman. He'll have the call with Jessica Mendoza and Aaron Boone. And on the line with right now is Buster Olney, who will also be on site as well. Buster, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Josh. How are you doing?
Very good. So I have to start with the Yankees because what we're seeing from Aaron Judge, on one hand, you don't see a rookie hitting home runs like he is, but you also don't see many rookies his physicality. I mean, this guy is a 6'7" monster of a man, and you assume the guy might be able to hit, but he's hitting so well and so consistently. What do you attribute that to?
His athleticism, which is, different than other big, tall guys we've seen in the past. Dave Kingman, for example, back in the day was this big slugger, but he wasn't the athlete. And other guys that size typically aren't the athlete that Aaron Judge is. He was a wide receiver, Aaron was, back in high school. And if you look at what he's doing for the Yankees this year, it's not only about the power that he's providing, but a full range of abilities. There's an interesting statistic, defensive runs saved, which essentially account for all the plays that you're making during the course of the year. As of this morning, the number one guy in Major League Baseball in defensive runs saved is Addison Russell, shortstop for the Cubs. Tied for third among all major leaguers in defensive run saves is Aaron Judge with Evan Longoria. So that tells you he's playing a really good right field. He's making a lot of plays. He's got a terrific arm, and he happens to be this guy who's hitting a home run about every other game, too.
I'm looking at the Yankees, and they're playing the Cubs this weekend. And of course, it's an awesome matchup because both teams are playing so well. But I also see the contrast. You saw the Cubs a few years ago. It was the youth. They were developing and growing something, and eventually they broke through. And I kind of see the Yankees on a similar track with guys like Judge and Bird and now Sanchez coming back from the injury.
Yeah, and about 6 weeks ago, I had a conversation with a longtime executive, and he said that where the Yankees are in 2017 is exactly where the Cubs were in 2015, to your point. That going into 2015, the thought was the Cubs have all these terrific young players, but they probably weren't going to be good enough to make the postseason. That was the expectation. And in Joe Maddon's first year, they surpassed those expectations. It seems like the exact same thing is going on with the Yankees. The interesting thing is, of course, that this year that you've got the young players coming like Aaron Judge, but you've also got some older guys like Chase Headley, Jacoby Ellsbury, Matt Holliday, earlier this season, CC Sabathia, who are performing well, who are doing a great job complimenting the young players. But yeah, it feels like that both of these teams, because of how many great young players they have, are going to be contending for championships for the next 4, 5, 6 years.
Buster, I remember a few years ago, some people questioned if Joe Girardi was still the man for the job. And it seems like as each year has gone by, he has evolved a little bit in his own managing style and how he has had to handle the players as he's gone from a veteran team to a younger team.
Yeah, and I think that generally speaking, I've known Joe since I covered him as a player when I was at the New York Times. I think he's more comfortable with younger players, which is what he has now. I got to say, when you're around the team in, 2014, 15, 16, I wondered how much fun he was having. And this spring, the first time I saw him, he just had the biggest smile on his face. He was talking about the layers of talent that the Yankees had coming through the system. And I was thinking to myself, again, even though we went into the year thinking, or most people thought the Yankees weren't necessarily going to contend this year, that it was going to be a lot more fun for Joe to manage a group of young players rather than the aging Derek Jeter or Alex Rodriguez and all that he went through in the last 3 years. I think he's absolutely having a great time. I thought that this contract might be the last for Girardi with the Yankees, and after seeing what he's doing early this year and the way that he's responded to this group of players, I think it's going to be a lot longer than that.
That's Yankees and Cubs this weekend. The series starts tonight. Of course, Sunday Night Baseball. Buster Olney will be on site with Dan Schulman and Jessica Mendoza and Aaron Boone. National telecast will be on ESPN at 8 p.m. Eastern. Buster, I want to talk about the other New York team now, the Mets. It seems like, first of all, this team can't stay healthy. You know, Cespedes and now Syndergaard. But can you explain to the audience a little bit of the history of what happened with Syndergaard? Because this is a guy, he missed the one start. From what we understand, he said no to an MRI, went out on Sunday, and now he has a partial tear of his lat, and it looks like he's going to miss 3 months. How did this all happen?
Well, I believe what Sandy Alderson, the Mets general manager, said when he told reporters that doctors have told him that there's no relationship between the injury that Syndergaard had 8 days ago, which forced the Mets to scratch him from that start, the soreness in his bicep, to the injury that he suffered last Sunday, which was the strained lat muscle. But I will say this. I mean, I don't think medically they're related. I think emotionally they're 100% related because Syndergaard 8 days ago wanted to pitch that game for the Mets, and the Mets said, no, we're going to scratch you from the start. We want to be careful. Syndergaard was upset about that, so the next day when they asked him to take an MRI, he says no. And then 2 days later, when he goes out and takes the ball, it just when he came out at the outset of that game, you got the feeling that he was going to show to the Mets, show to the world, my arm is healthy, I'm going to throw as hard as I can, and under those conditions, he got angry, and he got hurt. And you could see him grab his side when he threw the last pitch he threw before he had to walk off the field. It was like someone who, took a car out onto the interstate and suddenly was going 130 miles an hour, and now they're going to be without him for a few months. And I do think that the whole situation exposed the distrust between the team and some of its players.
The Mets are now 12-15 on the season, Buster. This is a team, they're 6.5 back of the Nationals. We obviously know they have time to catch back up, but it seems like the injury issue is becoming more and more of a problem. And also, they're minus 14 in runs scored versus runs against, and that's not a recipe for success.
No, and look, what did we talk about coming into the year? We talked about how the Mets had to have healthy starting pitching. Well, so far, they lost Steven Matz, and they lost Seth Lugo, and now they've lost Noah Syndergaard, and they're also without their best position player, Yoenis Cespedes. So, they might get lucky. They might have surprising performances from other guys. Maybe Robert Gsellman steps up in their rotation. Maybe Jay Bruce is a better year than they expected. Michael Conforto certainly is off to a really great start. But I just think this is way too much for them to overcome to make the playoffs, especially with the Washington Nationals playing so well at the outset of the season and their lineup producing so well.
Also in the National League East, a team that has actually the same record as the Mets, surprisingly, is the Philadelphia Phillies. A team that I think a lot of us expected they would have ups and downs throughout the season, and we've seen that. But the most interesting thing about the Phillies is Jeremy Hellickson. I remember years ago when he came up with the Rays, people talked about how much potential this guy has, how good he could be. And it seemed like when the league figured him out, he kind of went through that lull of having to get himself together. And this year it seems like this is the Hellickson that we all expected years ago.
Yeah, and he's off to a good start. And I think that because of the Phillies' timeline in their rebuilding process, that maybe they look at Jeremy Hellickson differently. When we started 2016 and they had Hellickson on the team, the thought around baseball was, okay, they bring him in for 1 year, they trade him during the course of the year when he rebuilds some value, and they flip him for some prospects. Well, they kept him all through the year. They didn't get suitable offers, and he wound up surprising them, I think, by taking the qualifying offer and staying with the team for 2017. And as you mentioned, he's been good again. Well, now the Phillies are a year closer, and given the problems that you're seeing with Atlanta's rebuild, given the issues the Mets are going through, and given the fact that the Phillies have so much payroll flexibility, when you talk with baseball executives now, they think that there's a chance that you will see the Phillies invest in Jeremy Hellickson, some kind of a long-term deal, because they certainly have the available money, and as they move forward, they're going to want a starting pitcher like him. It wouldn't surprise me if they went out in the market and, took offers for Hellickson. But here's the thing. The trade market for starting pitchers this summer is going to be absolutely saturated, and it might include someone like Yu Darvish of the Rangers and Garrett Cole of the Pirates. These are not conditions under which the Phillies would necessarily get a great offer for Hellickson. It might be that the most value that they could get out of him would just be to keep him and to lead the other young starters in the rotation.
Speaking of the Phillies' youth, a lot of the expectations this year, this would be the year that Maikel Franco would turn around, and Tommy Joseph would have that year finally at full-time at first base. Well, Joseph and Franco's batting average have been leaving a lot to be desired. Meanwhile, the guys who are actually hitting very well are Cesar Hernandez and Aaron Altair, both of them hitting over 300. What is it, the perspective around baseball about the Phillies hitters?
Hernandez is definitely exceeding expectations because after he had a good year last year, I talked with evaluators of other teams and asked them, and they said, "Nah, it was a blip. It was an aberration. He's not really that good." Well, you know what? Maybe he is that good. I think the struggles for some of the Phillies guys, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm not around the team every day, but I really think that whenever it is that they decide to go dive into the free agent market, and the expectation is in the fall of 2018 that they're going to be in the conversation for both Manny Machado and Bryce Harper. Once you get, I think, another established star, I think that's going to help Franco so much. I just have seen that dynamic so many times in covering baseball where, you get a young player and maybe he's not as disciplined in his approach as you want him to be, but all of a sudden if you make the team better, have more responsibility on his shoulders and have people around him who can help him in terms of carrying the middle of the lineup, that player becomes better, and I absolutely expect he's going to be one of those guys.
You mentioned that free agent, whether it's a Manny Machado or possibly Bryce Harper down the road. Do you think the Phillies, with all the available money they have, do you think this could be like a crazy spend, or do you think it will be a smart spend that they do?
I think it's going to be a smart spend. It's interesting because you do read from time to time the expectation that it's even the speculation that they could wind up with both guys. I don't think that's going to happen because of the luxury tax threshold. Look, Machado or Harper might wind up getting something in the range of $400 million. If the luxury tax threshold is about $210 million, let's say that Machado gets 35 to 40 a year, Harper gets something close to that. It's almost impossible to carry a successful payroll and build a good team if you have two players sucking up 35 to 40% of the dollars. It's bad business in this day and age. So I think that you're going to see the Phillies pursue both of these guys, but wind up getting only one of the two. And if I were betting the family farm back in Vermont on one of the two, I absolutely am convinced that Manny Machado is going to be in the Phillies in the spring of 2019.
Well, that just opened up the next most important question is, what is on the Olney family in Vermont, the farm in Vermont?
Lots of hay, some cows. When I was growing up, Jersey cows and pigs and chickens. Okay.
Because, I know some farmers, they have specialties. Some farms are more diversified. So, you got to ask.
This was old school dairy farmer. I totally get it.
He is Buster Olney. He'll be part of the crew on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN with Dan Schulman, Jessica Mendoza, and Aaron Boone. It's Sunday Night Baseball brought to you by Taco Bell. Yankees versus Cubs in Wrigley Field. Buster, I'm really looking forward to this series and really appreciate you coming on today.
I appreciate it, Josh. It's going to be a lot of fun.